Well, I will. I'll start off, and then I'll hand it over to Travis. I think a lot of you I know, many of you I don't know, and I see a lot of familiar faces from the Esports Summit and familiar names from a few years ago. But I'm Peggy Kuiper. I'm the director of Sport and Recreation Business at UAF, and I'm also currently interim athletic director as well. I just want to say thank you for attending tonight, and a special thank you to Jessica, John, and Manny for being willing to speak to our great esports community. We really appreciate it. I also want to give a quick thank you to Spencer and Travis for organizing the event, as well as Mark, our Dean Herman, if you could give a wave, for being willing to and open to supporting these ideas. We really appreciate it. And then lastly, to Mike and Maggie, if you two want to wave as well. Mike is our esports director on campus, or coordinator, sorry, and Maggie is the head of content creation at CTC, which is our community campus. So Travis, I'll let you take it from there.
Great, thank you, Peggy. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Travis Meisner. I'm an adjunct professor within the Sport and Recreation program at UAF. By day, I am the manager of partnership development with the Charlotte Hornets and Hornets Venom GT, which is our NBA 2K League esports affiliate. I am very excited to welcome you all in here tonight, as well as our three panelists here that I will get to in a moment. But first, wanted to say thank you to Peggy, to the School of Management, to UAF Esports and CTC Content Creation. Without that and the Sport and Recreation program, this wouldn't be possible. So thank you to everybody for jumping on tonight, as well as to our panelists. So tonight we're going to run through a gamut of things. We have an hour, and the goal is for the first 45 minutes or so to just be conversation and between the four of us. And then at the end, the last 15 minutes, we'll open it up for Q&A sessions for everybody else. So if you have any questions that you didn't submit ahead of time, you will have the opportunity at the end of this to share. You have the ability to unmute and add video at the end. So if you do ask a question in the last 15 minutes, we ask that you jump on and show us your face and let us know what you're looking for. So without further ado, I will get it kicked off. I will pass it along to the panelists to introduce themselves because I'm sure that I could not do a good enough job with it. So with that first, Jessica, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Jessica Estipona. I'm a manager of sourcing at Activision Blizzard. Sourcing is basically headhunting, stealing people from other companies. I help to build Overwatch League, Call of Duty League, a lot of the TESPA esports for collegiate at Blizzard, and have been working in esports and gaming. Well, I've been in gaming for 10 years. I've been in esports for about 4 years.
And Jessica, can you, I guess for everybody, before we go around, can you explain a little bit of what Activision Blizzard is? And then I'll ask the same of Manny and John as well, to kind of delineate between the different things that you both all do.
So Activision Blizzard is a game developer, been around for about 30 years at this point. I'm sure some of you have heard of Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, Hearthstone. They also co-publish Destiny, some other things, Skylanders. There's probably a lot of other things, Diablo, I'm not saying, but they are a major game publisher.
Awesome. Manny, I'll kick it to you next.
Sure. My name is Manny Lorras. I'm a senior director in team marketing and business operations at the NBA. I focus on what's called the NBA 2K League, which is our affiliate league at the NBA, which is obviously an esport. And what I do is I work in a consulting role and support people like Travis at the team side of things on all business operations, whether it's sponsorship, marketing, even structural with organization structure, really anything that sort of would be either a challenge or an area of improvement in terms of best practices. And then also we sort of help build out the guidelines of what our league sort of operates within. The 2K League, for anyone that's not familiar, is now heading into its 4th year, and we at the NBA started by partnering with Take-Two, which is the publisher of NBA 2K, and through this partnership, we really created a unique esport where not only are we crossing the line between traditional sports, but also with obviously the gaming world and that community. And The goal for us is, of course, trying to activate a younger demographic and really engage and sort of build that interest at a younger age as obviously fans of the NBA mature sort of out of that gaming phase. So excited to be here, and obviously thanks for having me.
Awesome, thank you. And John, you want to round us out?
Yeah, so John Spiher here, Vice President of Partnerships at Dignitas. Dignitas is a professional esports organization, so we field teams that compete in a variety of games in leagues like Overwatch League or NBA 2K League or what have you. Our main franchise is League of Legends and the LCS, the League Championship Series. And really appreciate you guys taking the time, and excited to talk through a bunch of stuff.
Awesome. I think one of the things that I'm most excited for on this panel is that the three of you all aren't in your first role in esports. You've all been in different roles in esports for a while, and in the lexicon of the timeline that esports has existed, you've all been in it for a considerable amount of time when you consider that that esports as a whole is not very old. So Manny, I'll start with you. Did you always want to work in esports? And if not, what is it that drove you towards the world of esports and gaming when that might not have been really a route to take when you were coming up?
It's a great question. So I never knew that there were opportunities in esports as I was starting my career. I think for me, it was more, I've always wanted to work in sports, found that opportunity working at Madison Square Garden, and then later on where the majority of my career has been spent at the NHL. And while I was there, an esports opportunity presented itself working at IMG, activating Bud Light, big brand, obviously in their first foray into esports. It was certainly different and unique in terms of never having exposure to the gaming world or even competition. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. So I never thought of it as an opportunity. What drove me towards it was the excitement that you could really build a white space and be a part of really creating things that are different and unique. It's a different space than what traditional sports has. With the NBA, you really see that clearly because on one side and of course you're in this boat as well, Travis, but you see how typical traditional sports operate and what actually engages fans and how you sort of monetize that way. But then you look at esports, it's a different behavior pattern. It's different in terms of what you develop. So being a part of just sort of having the opportunity of creating something completely different and new, I think that was exciting. I think I don't want to say drawback, but working on an institution like the NHL or the NBA that's been around for decades, it's a little challenging sometimes to sort of change the mold of what it's been.
Sure, I think that's something that in esports, especially the creativity is, and I know John and I talked about that a little bit, and I'm sure he'll allude to it, but the creativity is pretty endless when it comes to esports as a whole, especially when there is no precedent that's set. You can kind of create that from the beginning. Jessica, I'm curious your opinion. I know you've been at a couple different places in esports in your career in gaming. What is it that drove you towards esports specifically?
I wish I could say it was like something really sexy, but it was more just they said, you know sports and no one else knows how to do esports, so why don't you just go work on this project? So I was kind of thrown into the fire, and I found it really fascinating and interesting. And I had been in gaming for quite a while, so I knew what esports was, but I didn't realize how young people were actually becoming professionals at it, and how a lot of companies and even all of us today probably are still trying to figure out how to make it a business and make it profitable and really be sustainable. And so it's just, gaming in general is very innovative and fast moving, but esports is like that much quicker as well because it's just constantly changing.
It's really interesting, and you see it a lot in really all areas of gaming and esports, and I think it's a perfect testament with this panel with a developer, a league, and a team, and how fast those things can move. So John, I'll throw you the same question. I know that you have a little bit different path than the other two, but please tell us, like, did you always want to work in gaming and esports, and what was your driving factor towards that?
Yeah, the quick answer is it happened by accident. So I actually went to school for audio recording technology. I was a touring musician and a music teacher at the time. But over the course of high school, college, beyond, I was just always really involved in, kind of these grassroots movements with gaming and eventually esports, right? So one turned into a volunteer opportunity that turned into another company, wanting to hire me full time, and kind of everything exploded from there. So, I'd say at this point I've worked pretty directly in esports for about 12 years, and definitely a happy accident. I think, conveniently for people on this panel, there are a lot more defined pathways toward careers in esports and gaming than there used to be. But gaming's always been a passion, so it's one of those you kind of make your own reality type of situations. So yeah, very, very blessed, but certainly a bit of a happy accident.
Yeah, I think anybody who knows my background knows that it's kind of the same thing. It's, 2K and esports for me was definitely a time and a place. Being the youngest guy on a team, they're like, hey, why don't you do this? And, it sounded interesting to me. And that was kind of how I got into it as well. I think the interesting part about esports, to Jeff's point on how fast this all moves, is that you don't really know what the future holds. You know that there's been, you see all the numbers, you see all the people watching around the world, and you see a lot of these brands that are getting involved and whatnot. I'm curious to each of you, and Jess, I think we'll start with you. What do you think is like the next, what does the next 1 to 2 years and beyond look like in esports? I think students in this program that are on this call are likely 1 to 2 years from graduating. What do you think is the future of esports? What do you think is the next thing that students preparing or interested to getting into the industry should be aware of?
That's a good question. I wish I could tell you the future, but I know it's going to grow. I know the audience is going to grow. I know the industry is going to grow as a whole. We're going to continue to, pivot with pandemics thrown in our face and how to make everything remote. And that seems really interesting for this particular demographic because it is all electronic and virtual. So, coming up with the broadcast virtually is very challenging, but can be done. So I think it will continue to grow and prosper. And I think it's one of those safe things that people can play, with distance from each other. And the challenging things is the distance as far as like global time zones and traveling and that sort of thing, being far away from your family if you're on a team and need to stay close. So those might be challenging temporarily, but as far as like, prospects for people coming out of college, I always just tell people, find something that you love doing, find something that you're passionate about, whether it be if you want to be a spectator in a broadcast, if you want to work on finance, if you are interested in strategy, if you're interested in marketing. Like there's anything that any business has, esports has. So if you love gaming, obviously people are like, I'm like, rated platinum in Overwatch. I'm like, well, that's great, but it's not really going to get you a job unless you're like, going to be a professional. And that's a very, very small percentage, just like making an MBA. So I tell people, find something that you like to do that you can get paid for besides just playing games, and follow it. And when you get really good at something, then you get hired for it and you have something to offer. So if you can think about it being needed in any business that has content and broadcast, it's in esports.
I think that's really a valid point. When we were in our sports sales class or sports marketing class that I help out with the sport and recreation business program, so we talked about it. It's like, how do you prepare yourself, or how do you give yourself that breadth of experience to best prepare yourself to enter that job market? I think that's a really valid point, and it applies here as well. Manny, to you, like, what do you think? I know the NBA 2K League is doing a lot to innovate and a lot to be different, but maybe not specifically to the 2K League, or maybe, I don't know, it's up to you, but what do you think does the future look like in this industry?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Jessica has said applies to my answer. I mean, you see it growing, it's growing now. The pandemic, I think, it created more viewership. There's more metrics that sort of gain attention from brands. But ultimately, I think where we are in terms of maturity as a property or as a entertainment vertical, we're certainly early on still. And if you just see the growth in the last 3 years, not just with our property, but in esports in general, and then think through how that might look like in the next 3 years ahead of us. I mean, there's exponential growth. And to the point Jessica made as well, in terms of, there are different career verticals that exist in esports. When I was looking for jobs in college, I wanted to be a marketer. I wanted to do something marketing wise. And then realizing that I could do that with something I was passionate about, which was sports, and pursued that. So anyone in certainly that's here right now and, that might enjoy gaming and of course, that industry or that genre, certainly as John sort of explained, maybe for him, the path was, it took a while for how to be molded, but today those opportunities exist. I mean, across all of our teams in the 2K League, there's certainly different opportunities that are there. And then if you go beyond that, I think the professionalized version of esports that exists today certainly caters to that.
John, I don't know if you have anything else to add about what you believe the future of the industry looks like.
Yeah, I can definitely answer with just a couple of direct predictions. So things we've seen in the last year or two that are starting to emerge. I think holistically, as it pertains to esports, right? Like you have kind of these digital interactive content creators, which I think will take a bigger place in the near future. So that's like VTubers. I think that there will be just a higher amount of mobile esports and VR esports in the near future. We're seeing later this year, Wild Rift from Riot Games. It's their kind of phone version of League of Legends. We're expecting that to take off, but mobile esports hasn't really been as prominent as one might expect it to be, even though all of us have these smartphone devices. So I think there will be a huge surge there. A subsidiary of that is everything 5G, the big 5G debate on what it all means, how you're getting faster connectivity and how that's better for gaming. And then just more like interactive broadcast capabilities, right? So we've seen, again, going back to Riot Games, they created this digital pop band called KDA, and they brought it to life literally through this augmented reality broadcast that they did on the world stage in a major stadium. So I expect a lot more of those things, which means the subsidiary of it all, right, is a lot of engineers, a lot of people focused on how those technologies get to interact with the community as a whole. So again, marketing, engineering, and a lot of facilitation, project management. So yeah, those are some of my predictions. Yeah,
I think, it's the world of esports to me as someone who's in it, in some respects, is tough to really understand the full scope of what it actually is. You hear, I'm talking to brands all the time, and John and Manny, I know you guys are as well. But you're talking to brands about how they can get more involved in esports, and you're trying to explain to some people who, a lot of people in the generation ahead of us may not really understand what it's all about. They just hear esports and they know eyeballs, and that's kind of it. That's one of the challenges, I think, for students as well, is that the gaming, and to Jess's point, you play video games, you're really good at CSGO, but how does that connect to being in the industry itself? How, and Manny, we'll go to you, how do you suggest students find opportunities in esports? How do you find where to go, what to do, how to pursue an internship or a career that's not your influencer, Twitch streamer, or professional gamer? What resources are there for students to use to try to build their network and get their foot in the door?
From my perspective, having worked at IMG on esports and at the NBA, I don't think it's much different than really in sports or any other industry that at least I've pursued. The networking, certainly taking opportunities to be in front of the right people that work in those industries. Twitch as a example, finding ways to sort of build those relationships and gaining access to those people. I think that's certainly still valuable, and at least from what I've experienced and seen, that's been effective. I think if you have a specific interest in esports, at least for me, because typically I came from a world where people are just interested in sports. You kind of stand out just because I don't get a ton of that. And that certainly opens the door for me to want to have those conversations, to the network, and sort of learn a little bit more about that person. Because it's still relatively new, and you just don't, it's not as mainstream even in that world, or in terms of looking for those opportunities, at least that I've seen. But I also work at a traditional sports property that has an esports, so it's a little different for me. But in my experience, it's no different than those core things that you would do in any opportunity.
Sure, and I think Jess, I know that you do more. You don't really manage entry level positions. It's more middle and upper management with Activision Blizzard. But in your opinion, or in your understanding, where is it that you think it would be the best way for someone who's just coming out to find more information or resources to figure out kind of how to get in the door?
I totally agree with Manny. Networking is really important, and it's actually pretty challenging sometimes, especially this day and age. So you kind of have to put a little hustle into it. I always recommend people get on LinkedIn and start creating a profile for yourself, and just like networking with people virtually, going to conferences when you can. Another idea is to look for companies that hire esports professionals. The Riots, the ESLs, the DreamHacks of the world, and see what their job postings are and what they're looking for, what kind of requirements they're looking for, and then work towards those things. One way to get experience is to volunteer at those events. That takes networking. You can't just show up and say, I want to work. You have to know someone who can put you in a spot to help. So volunteering for things. Some people volunteer to be community managers for kind of more nascent local esports events, and you can form groups outside of school. You can find people that want to play Halo, and you form little tournaments. It's just fun things for a local area, stuff like that. Just try to get some experience, even if it's just completely free and you're just having fun with it. But try to figure out what it is you want to be doing in the industry, and then go volunteer and do it if you can. Try to find internships. Most internships for large companies are going to be, you have to it's got to be between either your sophomore year and your junior year, or your junior year and senior year. You have to be a full-time student. You have to be going back to school. Most of them. Smaller companies don't have stringent requirements around that, but they also likely won't pay you sometimes. So be careful with those. I don't know, that's some ideas.
The infamous free internship. I know that I did a few of those. So, and I don't agree with it, but I think everybody on this call has probably done one at some point or another. John, I'll throw that to you. If there's anything that these two didn't have that you want to add, what would you do to tell students to get their foot in the door?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, the most important bar none is definitely networking, right? Everybody said that. I think that's also, hopefully should be the most obvious. I think right now we're also in a really unique time where every single one of these conferences that normally is on the other side of the country or the other side of the world is now digital, which means your level of access to all of these people, all of these rights holders, all of these experts is far easier than it's ever been in history. So you should take advantage of that, right? Even things like this, talking on a panel, with a variety of people with differing points of view that you can gain insight from, those are important. You should try and do one at least once a month, if not once a week. There are, plenty of those that continue to exist, and the vast majority of them end up actually being free, or at least providing a lot of those details and a lot of that content after the fact. For me personally, I answer every email that I receive, right? My email is listed on 100 different websites, on my social media, and a variety of other places. I operate pretty similarly to a lot of others in this space. And I think the biggest barrier to entry is being afraid to host a conversation. So don't be afraid to reach out if that ends up being on LinkedIn, if that ends up being on Twitter, on Discord, on whatever it ends up being. Every single esports organization has a community Discord. We watch those diligently. Just about every major league or tournament or publisher or game has a respective official Discord as well. And again, there are a lot of opportunities to engage and try and have a real conversation with a real person to gain someone in your network. And I just highly advise actually going through the steps and continuing to do that and not getting disincentivized if someone doesn't respond, because someone eventually will.
I totally agree. And if I could give a quick anecdote to that, that's exactly how I got connected with Jessica on this call. It was trying to find somebody in the industry that might be willing to be on this panel with all of us. And I found her on LinkedIn and I reached out, right? Just like, that's like, we've never met before prior to last week when we spoke about this. And that really goes back to like, people are willing to talk to you. People are willing to help if you take the time to reach out. And that's agnostic to esports. That's everybody. That's sports. If you want to go into traditional sports, if you want to go into business, if you want to go into teaching, if you want to, whatever you want to do, people want to help other people, especially if you're willing to take the chance to reach out. And I think that is a really great point that all three of you echoed, that should be taken note. If you take something away from this, it should be the value of networking and reaching out and kind of going out on a limb to try to make that connection, because I think it's understated in total how important that is in any industry. One of the things that to me is very unique in the time that we're in, and a few of you have alluded to this already, but COVID has thrown a wrench in everybody's lives. Esports seems to be an industry that has, I don't want to say thrived because it's such a negative time, but has done well as in the layout of sports entertainment. Esports has probably been the most successful during this time because you can play remotely. I'm curious, as an individual, I know that I've pivoted heavily in my individual job, working from home for the last year, and obviously having to change a lot of things with the NBA and in the NBA 2K League. But I'm curious, as individuals, how have you had to pivot right now, and how has your team had to pivot to try to adjust to this pandemic? Because I know that everybody's had to pivot in some way, shape, or form, and flexibility is such a key factor in successful people in this world. So Manny, I'll throw it to you if that's all right. How have you pivoted? How has the 2K League handled some of this stuff and all the hurdles that have been thrown?
Yeah, well, me and my role, typically I'd be traveling to markets and meeting with you in person and certainly trying to understand the business a little bit differently. So I think to John's point before regarding networking, the access has been a lot easier, where our team visits typically would be over a few days. I could schedule different meetings with personnel that I need to meet with and sort of gain information pretty quickly. So from that standpoint, in my role, that's changed. However, 2K League, I think, is a pretty good story for us. Normally our season gets played out of a centralized studio in New York, where we have all our players fly in each week and participate in matches in the studio that we've created. And that's kind of our business model for the first few years until we felt comfortable having games played out of each local market. So this forced us to accelerate that local gameplay and even introduce something we hadn't done before, which was remote gameplay and essentially playing from each city. And it turned out to be a pretty tremendous improvement for us, and something that going forward we're looking to strategize to create more of a hybrid model where we'll certainly play a number of games remotely and still have games played out of some sort of, maybe not centralized studio, but some bigger event. But this alleviated significant costs from a team standpoint. It also allowed us to be really creative from a broadcast standpoint, just being able to sort of do different things in a marketplace where teams might have more resources and access. There's some limitations given what the pandemic has created, and certainly, contact with people, but ultimately it went a long way in at least helping us think through what our strategy is as far as gameplay. So for us, it's been significant.
John, I'm curious your perspective from the team side, and you as vice president and helping out with partnerships. How have you pivoted? How has the team pivoted, and how has this all changed for you over the last year?
Yeah, so when you think about Dignitas as an esports organization, we actually have 8 teams that compete across 4 or 5 different esports titles. League of Legends, LCS, that normally involves that team competing out of Riot Games' studio in Los Angeles. That's not happening right now. When you look at our Counter-Strike team and the main league that they compete in, which we co-own, called Flashpoint, that involves them, instead of living in Sweden and Norway, living in Los Angeles for 6 months out of the year. That's not happening. We went from having an international circuit of major LAN events to really doing everything out of the comfort of our own homes, which is great in some capacities from a cost perspective, but certainly diminishes a lot of value. And when it comes to things like partnerships, hey, you're normally seeing these jersey shots from all points of view, showcasing all the logos from front, from back, from left, from center. Well, now you have a webcam feed, so everything has to be centralized in the front. So, there are certainly a variety of pivots that we've had to make to recoup some of that. I'd say as a business and holistically, it's been a lot easier for us as nothing's really ceased to ceased production or ceased competition. Compared to a lot of our traditional sports counterparts. With that, we've seen a lot of increased viewership across all of the games that we play. There are, 2020 has been record breaking for so many different titles, to, increases in viewership in our content and in league broadcast content and so on. But from the partnership standpoint specifically, we normally have a lot of experiential stuff, right? We normally do things with the, at the Prudential Center, for instance, or in our facility in New Jersey, or our facility in Los Angeles. We can't do any of those. So it's just been trying to find ways to digitize those experiences as much as possible and remain flexible and remote and still provide value to both brands and fans.
Yeah, it's been a lot for everybody. Jessica, I'm curious in your role, how you have pivoted, how you changed your process, and if you can provide any context on the company and what you guys have done as a whole. Like, how has life changed over the last year?
For me personally, I actually worked from home before the pandemic hit, so it was actually more like welcoming the rest of the company to what my life normally looks like, and having them remember what it feels like to forget people on calls. But actually, I think for our company, they weren't super keen on work from home, so I think it's actually kind of opened up some flexibility with people's work lives and work balance. Or lack thereof, because they can never leave work. They're always there. But actually really accelerated our technology usage for work from home, but also for remote broadcast. Like, I think we had a lot of things already kind of in the works to be able to do some of the things that we pulled off the last year, but we had to accelerate them very quickly because just a lot of like the partnership activations and that sort of thing. We had to, and being able to get people across the world to be able to play each other, remotely. So that, I think that obviously there was some revenue lost in, like you were saying, John, with activations and experiential, that, we're all sad that we can't be having these things in person, but we were able to pivot some really interesting creative ways, and people really stepped up to make things happen. So as we accelerated technology, I think it's just personally, and I know for other folks, you kind of lose the humanity element. Jared had reached out, said he went to a couple championships, and it's so much fun to be around people. You really get the feeling. It's very different when you're just watching from Twitch or from YouTube, and it's not quite the same excitement. But it's nice that we can still be able to provide that outlet and that entertainment when a lot of things got shut down. For me, as a headhunter, there was actually a lot more people on the market, unfortunately, because people were losing their jobs or furloughed, especially in professional sports areas and, in events, production. So sadly, there were a lot of people looking for jobs, and we didn't always have a place for them. So as a headhunter, that's like a good thing when you have lots of people to choose from, but as a nice person who likes to see people unemployed, that part was hard for me. But we have to just do a really good job of like deliberately communicating with each other, because when you're not running into people in the hallway, you forget that those are your friends and those are people that inspire you to continue doing what you're doing. And it's not just a job. It's the people around you that really make a big difference. I personally really miss traveling. I miss going to conferences and accidentally finding prospects because I met them on a plane or at a conference, and didn't realize that, oh, this person would be really great for this role I have, 6 months from now. So I really miss humans. I'm a super extroverted person. And so that's been hard for me. I've had to been much more flexible on how I connect with people.
I could not agree with you more. I miss knocking down Manny's door every time I go to New York and pulling his ear on stuff with the 2K League. I think just in general, I was having this conversation the other day. For me, I'm the same way, Jessica. Like I'm an extroverted person. I think I imagine most of us on this call are, given our roles. And to your point, the water cooler conversation, right? It's just like the things that you don't think have a whole lot of value, that if you're a student and you've never worked in an office, the value of just having that one-on-one interaction with someone as you're walking through the hallway, it's no different than in school. In the library, when you bump into someone, like just building those relationships with people makes the workday go by a lot faster, and it helps you really build relationships with people on your team. I know I can speak firsthand, like that's how Manny and I got to know each other so well, is working hand in hand together with the league and with Venom as we launched. Like, I mean, Manny and I had weekly calls at some points there with some of the stuff that was going on. And I was in New York and touring on doing a lot of that stuff. So you miss that in the travel and all the things that go along with it. As much as traveling can be a boon sometimes, it's also when you don't do it for a year, you definitely miss it. I'm curious, and I think part of the reason that we're doing this whole panel in the first place is to really provide students with context and ideas in different areas that they can get involved in the industry. Again, I go back to the idea that we have a league, a developer, and a team all represented. I'm going to ask you, what are some of the advantages of your individual areas? I won't ask you for any disadvantages, but what are some of the perks of being on a team or at a league or a developer compared to maybe one another, and how do they differentiate with one another? Manny, I'll send it to you on this one, knowing that the 2K League is a little different because you're with the NBA, but just as a whole, and the NBA as well, it's a little different than being at a team.
For me, I think, and this is just speaking from my experience as well, I think there's a different type of structure that exists with the NBA that sort of leads into the 2K League. It currently exists now more so in esports than it did 3 years ago when I first came over to the NBA. And I think that, there's a lot of good with that. Certainly some negative in terms of you carry over some of the, let's say, old way of thinking and not so much the opportunity to really be creative in a different space. But I think the good is just, knowing that the NBA has gone through a lot of certain things before, in terms of allowing teams or certainly creating opportunities for teams, and then working with organizations that are really experts at marketing and experts at selling brands. I think just the opportunity to sort of work in one area, but also always having the exposure of the other area. And certainly you and your role could speak to that. I think that's unique and different. And I got a little bit of that when I worked at IMG with AB, working on esports, definitely a lot more into esports and certainly more endemic esports. But I think knowing or working with a brand like Anheuser-Busch that carries the budgets that they do, certainly it enables the opportunities to succeed and not individually so much, but just whatever programs you might be working. So I think that's kind of like the unique benefit that we have at the league.
Absolutely. And I guess I'll rephrase the question. Manny, you totally teed that up well. I'll send it to John here. John, give the students your sales pitch on why they should want to work for a team or why they should want to work for Dignitas.
Boy, I mean, I'll say publishers still hold all the power, actually, comparatively from esports organizations. But on the esports side, specifically on the org side, you know, we really are the talent. We are the rights holders. We get to build these brands that will be known for the next 100 years plus. And that's really exciting, right? Like the ability to effectively build the NFL of tomorrow and build, you know, the next Dallas Cowboys or whatever ever else, you know, depending on your sports affiliation. I think those things are really interesting. You know, for me, especially on the partnership side in esports, I have the capacity to do something with a brand that has never thought about how to get in front of consumers in this market, right? It could be their first time in esports. It could be that category's first time in esports. And that's something that, you know, really excites us. You know, one of our partners this year is Susquehanna International Group. And it's okay if you haven't heard of them. They're a B2B focused company, but they're an investment bank and they wanted to be in esports. So we got to find ways to help them get in front of people through the lens of esports. And that's been, you know, really interesting, but it's also the first investment bank of you know, partnering with any esports organization in the world. And, you know, the same way that we were the first brand to partner with Verizon before they worked with FaZe Clan or the LCS. Of great benefit to me personally is being able to find a brand who has not yet targeted our audience and things that matter in gaming and get to help them craft that strategy. And that's really exciting. So to me, that isn't unique to just teams, but you partner with a league if you want the highest amount of impressions. To me, you partner with an organization, a team, if you want a really intimate relationship with a fan base. And that's something that's unique to us. And that's always really exciting to bring to life through our talent.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that translates to traditional sports as well. I think a lot of what you just said, the sentiment it's a little bit earlier in its life cycle. Jessica, this is a softball toss question for you. I know you're selling yourself all the time you're selling Activision Blizzard to prospects all the time, but give us the sales pitch as to why students coming out of the industry would want to work at a developer like Activision Blizzard.
I guess the big word is stability. Gaming is not necessarily the most stable place to work always. They are known for having crunch times and layoffs, but the bigger ones generally will try to repivot their talent to do something else, and they try not to have layoffs. That doesn't mean that they're immune to it. So they're pretty stable. They've still been profitable through this terrible time. That doesn't mean that they're immune to economic crisis, because they also will feel that later usually. It's also super innovative. Like most gaming companies are at the top of technology. They have to keep up with it in order to stay relevant. So they're constantly having to update with the platforms they're working with, as well as mobile, or their own platforms. Like for us with Battle.net, EA has Origin. So they're gonna always have the most updated software for everything. They're not cheap on paying for stuff like that. So that's good. I know a lot of older companies have slow software and they're just like, we invested in this, so we're staying with it. They're always going to stay on top of that stuff. So that's great. They also have a little bit more control. I want to say esports, like we have a little bit more influence over the games, but games actually platform games take like 2 to 3 years to 4 years to build. So by the time the esports, leagues have their maps and everything, and they want to influence the next year, it's already too late for them to influence the next year. So they have to build those relationships and really help those teams build games with esports in mind. And not all game companies or studios within game companies want to do that. So they have a little bit of more influence. They actually, they will also just keep more of the profits generally, not always. I know for EA, like with FIFA, you've got FIFA, you have the game FIFA, you have like the FIFA branch, and then you have like the MLS or wherever other, then you have the teams. That's a lot of sharing revenue. So I don't know if anyone's making money on those deals. So there's that.
That's great. I think that lays it out well, and a perfect way to lead into our student Q&A. So I have other questions if we don't have any interest, but I'll give you all the chance now if you'd like to ask our panelists a question, please fire up that camera and feel free to jump on. The floor is yours.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
Sweet. So just first, thank you to everyone for putting this together. I really appreciate it. What is the one skill to all of you that you would say has benefited you the most so far in your career?
I'm going to give two answers. So one, project management and organization holistically, right? Lots of things going on, lots of things to handle. Knowing how to stay on top of it and to stay organized is a huge asset. The second, which, particularly in departments and roles like partnerships where you're accountable to other people and third parties, I'd say having a solutions focused mindset, right? And by that, I mean, there are never problems that are unsolvable. You just need to come to the conversation with ways to get to the end that you want and make that happen. And I think having that as a mentality in everything that you do, regardless of if it's partnership or anything else, is tremendously valuable to any organization.
From my perspective, I'd say certainly relationship building. I think I've always been in roles where you work cross-functionally, cross-departmentally. Certainly now I work with teams. And I think not only is that a necessary skill to have in general, if you're going to be working part of a big organization, I think just having the opportunity to sort of create more opportunities from that, it's benefited me, and it's been a big reason why I even entered esports. I was recruited by my old client that I had worked with when I was at the NHL, who oversaw a team that was starting an esports vertical. So that to me has been the biggest benefit.
For me, I would say it's relationship building. You never know when someone's going to end up working with you or become your boss someday, and just treat everyone with respect, and not in like in an altruistic way, not like in like I want something from you way. Actually build relationships purposefully, and listen. And then the other thing I would say is communicating, being able to talk to anyone, which helps you build relationships. So it got really, really helpful. My job's kind of a selfish answer, but you asked what I think is most important. So that's what's helped me with my job. My first role they asked me to fill with Overwatch League was head of marketing, and they wanted someone from a professional football team or a professional basketball team. And I was basically reaching out to the CMOs of like the Chargers and the Raiders. And, we were in California, so I was trying to focus on the West Coast a little bit, but I reached out to the guy at the New York Jets. Who knows if they're going to talk to me, but I have to be able to talk to them as people. They're just people.
I would echo a similar sentiment as everybody in an effort to be a little bit different. I think the other thing too is creativity. Being in the partnership side, and I know that Manny and John are in this world as well, is to John's point, finding solutions, but just trying to think differently. In traditional sports, most paths have been carved already, and very rarely can you accomplish something in pro sports that hasn't been done before, or that is so unique and different that everybody turns heads. In esports, it's limitless in the things that you can do and the ways to get creative to drive value, whether it's for your own brand, whether it's for the league that you're at, or whether it's for the team that you're at. And I can speak, as a member of the 2K League, like some of the things the 2K League have done, the 3-for-all tournaments and things like that, like that's different and that's new and that's never been done before. And some of that creates the creative mindset. I think you have to have that and that curiosity in order to be in esports. Otherwise, you're just kind of repeating the same thing that we've done in traditional sports for a long time, which doesn't really get you that far, and you're not able to adapt as well as fast as the industry is moving, to one of the points that we made earlier. Does anybody else have any other questions?
I have just a quick question. One thing that I like to ask a lot of speakers or people that I'm interviewing is there any college courses that really stuck out to you that you think helped push you a little bit further in your job or maybe gave you that extra leg up. It's just kind of always nice to see if there's anything we should be looking out for, especially if there's any underclassmen in these.
John, you want to go on this one?
I mean, again, audio recording technology didn't really help me a whole lot, so I might be the wrong person to ask. I think having at least a general understanding of marketing, having a general understanding of business management, all of those help. Classes in communications will only help you, better be able to articulate ideas. Yeah, I'd probably leave it at there, but I also think that, more and more these days you're seeing esports focused curricula that might be able to give you a more in-depth approach. And again, you guys as younger people entering the industry workforce, the more you know about the space that you're trying to enter, the more credentialed you'll be. So some of that are college courses, some of that is online learnings, but yeah, I think covering those basics of communications, marketing, business management are all tremendously valuable.
Jessica?
The first thing that came to mind was the rugby class I took and how humbling it was. But that's not going to be very useful to you, especially right now. I'm going to say it again. Find something you like to do. Find something you love that you're also pretty good at and get better at it. Because you can take a million classes on things, but if you don't like doing them, you're not going to want to work hour and hour and hour. Like when you get a job, it's pretty much your life. So find something you like. If you like math, look at coding or finance. If you like being creative, marketing or strategy, find something you love and study that.
I'll just add, from my perspective, I'm trying to think. I always liked creativity in high school. I taught myself graphic design and I felt like I was going to be some sort of marketer. So that was always a central focus. And I think it was reinforced taking those classes in college. It's kind of a different answer and sort of a theme we've been saying. When I specifically had classes with people that had worked in the industry that I wanted to work in, whether it was a creative director at a company or, like in this case, obviously Travis, you work in sports. For me, I felt like that was most valuable because the experience factor is something that I apply to today. I could think back and remember certain examples that were taught that come from actually going through it. So from my perspective, I feel like it's not necessarily because of a course, it's more of the people that are teaching it, just sort of learning it from that type of foundation. I think that was very helpful. And also, I mean, I can't say I've actively kept in touch, but the times that I had, there certainly was that networking aspect that sort of built from college level. So yeah, that's my answer.
I have a quick answer to that one. And for me, it was in graduate school because I have a totally different background than sports before I went into grad school. But I know that they offered at UAF, because I teach it, is anything in revenue generation. Even if you don't want to go into sales, not everybody on this call is on sales, but you need to, if you want to work in business, you need to understand how money's made. And even if you're not actively selling, you're selling in some way, shape, or form. John and I are selling brands and why they should work with our team. Manny is selling teams on why they should invest in the league and why they should be franchises in the league. Jessica is selling people on why they should want to work for Activision Blizzard. Everybody is selling something in some way, shape, or form, unless you go into an art or something, a little more narrow. So if you want to go into anything that touches the realm of business, learning how to sell or how revenue generation works is so important. Even if you have no interest in a career in sales, just understanding how it works to me is very important.
I'll just add to that point, actually. The COO at the NHL at the time, John Collins, I asked him if he had to give me one piece of advice. He said, if you could sell, you're always golden because everyone's going to want you no matter what role you get. So I actually completely agree with that.
Great. Anybody else? I think we have time for one more question.
I had a question. I was wondering what you guys like, what's the first thing you look for when looking at like a resume or an email or a LinkedIn, something like that?
Jessica, this is up your alley if you want to go first.
Well, it depends on what I'm looking for, but generally, if let's say I'm looking for a legal counsel for Blizzard, I'm going to look and see where they've worked before and how many years of experience they have. From an undergrad or just someone coming out of business school, I'll probably look to see what kind of internships they had. I'm looking for how you can add value to me. That's as a big company. And we have very specific roles and narrow roles. If you don't have a lot of experience, start smaller and diversify, because you will be doing it like jack of all trades. But it's got to be clean. It's got to sell you, and not oversell you. Like someone who's just coming out of college shouldn't be the COO of a company, because then you're comparing yourself to other COOs of large companies. Like, it's okay to not have that much experience when you're coming out of college. That's what I would expect from someone coming out of college. So don't oversell yourself, because then I'm not going to take you seriously. So that's a quick and dirty one, but I'm happy to look at your resume if you want me to look at it.
Yeah, I'd say also too, Ryan, being in college, having the ability to participate in student groups and esports and gaming focused groups, things like that. One, I think that's actually really important, particularly on the esports side. We certainly have entry-level positions that we hire for over the course of the year. Someone who seems to genuinely have a passion and interest for our field is going to set themselves apart from someone who doesn't tout that same success or same interest. And then to the same degree, LinkedIn has a lot of really cool tools for you to show media and projects and articles and things like that you've created. If you build something, show it off. The more I can better understand at face value just from that link who you are and what you have to bring to the table, that can be extremely beneficial toward me being interested in someone as a candidate.
I'll just add that I think, to John's point, just any experience in gaming or level of interest, I think hiring for esports positions, I don't see that a lot. So it certainly stands out for me, but maybe not so much in terms of a resume. For me, I find when people reach out, sometimes I don't hear from them. And I think the ones that stand out in that manner are the ones that are actually persistent in a way that's appropriate, where there's a level of interest to wanting to, whether it's build a relationship or even just, learn about different opportunities that might open up. You don't just hear from them when there are open opportunities. I think that, that sort of what sticks with me.
I agree. And I'll wrap this quick, but I think you have an opportunity when you're applying for jobs. Your resume is one thing. If they give you the opportunity to write a cover letter, to me, telling your story is so important. It's so hard to summarize who you are in little bullets on a resume, but if you get the opportunity to write a cover letter, too many people waste that space on a cover letter and just copy and paste over. I think, to me, adding a story about who you are really makes a difference. I know we're at time, but I'm going to take the liberty and ask one very quick question, because I want to wrap it up with this on a really fun note. I want to give you all an opportunity to brag a little bit about some of the really cool stuff that we do. I think it's so easy to fall in like how tough our day-to-day things can be in some ways. In reality, it's really not that tough when you look at the grand scheme of things, but everybody here is in a really cool role at a really cool place. I want to know, what is the coolest thing or most unique thing that you've been able to do, event, conference, or play, whatever that is, the single coolest thing that you've been able to do in your role or in your career in esports? And I will throw it to John first.
Yeah, I'll just go with one of the most recent ones. And to backtrack 1 second, I also won't look at applications that don't have a cover letter. So if you have the ability to write one, write one. Otherwise, if you're not going to give me the time, why would I give you the time? I guess most recent cool thing that I did, we just went through a pretty major rebrand, which was about 7 months of work. Effectively, we went more closer toward a previous mark that Dignitas had entitled Digi, but we really evolved this into being more than just a logo, but also a mascot, but even more so than a mascot, as a real, tried and true character. We're going to be doing a lot of things with Digi over the course of the year, and it's just been a really cool process over the last 7-8 months at this point to build a backstory, build a lot of the character, how we're integrating brands, and it was tremendously successful on social when we rebranded and we talked some shit to a couple of other orgs, and it's been great. So that's high on my list right now.
That's awesome. Jessica, I'll throw it to you.
For me, it's actually going to like BlizzCon and Overwatch League, and just having like special access to be behind the scenes and actually watch people like cry and get engaged and just be super excited about being there, and just it's pretty magical. So I just feel privileged to have been part of like the small part of helping make that magic happen for people. I'm lucky to work in a really creative world, so it's fun to see that come to light.
Yeah, Manny, and why don't you round us out here?
Sure. I think at the highest level would be helping build out the 2K League. Certainly bringing in expansion franchises. That's been a pretty special experience. But I think more tactical was outside of my role, really. When our hiatus hit last year at the start of the pandemic, 2K League's hiatus, including NBA's hiatus, of course, I project led and pretty much really saw through all of the 3-for-all showdown that you referenced before, which was the first time on the NBA level we had an activation or any type of activity that brought in all of our affiliate leagues. We had G League teams, we had WNBA teams, we had outside influencers. So the amount of earned media it drove was pretty significant. So it was a lot of fun to be a part of.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jessica, Manny, John. You all are the best. We thank you so much on behalf of the Sport and Recreation Program, the School of Management, UAF Esports, and CTC Content Creation. This has been wonderful. You guys are so gracious with your time. I know I very much appreciate it, as is everybody else that has anything to do with this program. So with that, I'll let you all go back to your nights or afternoons or whatever the time it is, wherever you are. Thank you again, and we appreciate you guys taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Our pleasure.